job ain't done till we hold that trophy up. Hey.
Man, that Cronenworth hit there, that seems like a long time ago now, huh? Episode 608, Talking Friars podcast and YouTube show. Ben Fadden here with a special guest, Jon Schaeffer. Jon and Jim, obviously great friend of the show and a friend of their program. And make sure to check out all of their stuff with Jon and Jim, Padres wrap-up show. But Jon, thank you so much for joining the show. But I just want to get right into it here. Obviously, the Padres, it's been rough here these last 8 road games, right? That's 8 consecutive road losses in a row. They're under 500. They're finally out of a wild card spot, so we can stop saying, well, they're in the playoffs if the season ended today, which obviously it doesn't, and it means nothing when we say that. But if that can be a positive if you want to, go the Mike Shildt route and be positive about the way things are right now. But my first question is just where this Padres team is at. Are you surprised with where they're at? They're after that 19 game stretch, they went 9-10 when they had 16 games against teams that were sub 500. And now they're again under 500. Are you surprised by this?
First of all, thanks for having me on, Ben. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Enjoying the work you're doing with Talking Friars. I appreciate your support of Jon and Jim and the wrap-up show for your viewers as well. So, no, I'm not surprised because this is really who this franchise has been by and large. I mean, there's ups and downs. And this roster, as we said, heading into the year, honestly lacked some of the qualities from the 2023 team that underperformed. And this team, I don't know if they're underperforming or not, or they're just playing kind of to their capabilities. There's some deficiencies. There's some injuries. And there's been some poor play. I mean, let's be honest. Getting swept by the Mets, Angels, and Rockies is poor play. Even if the Padres aren't going to be a 90-win team, that just shouldn't really be acceptable, and they shouldn't be in a spot where they're getting swept by those teams. So there's so much to be determined. There's so many highs and lows over the course of a season. They're fortunate to be in the National League. I think it's a different conversation in the American League, but they can weather this, in my opinion. It doesn't mean they're going to get to October, like Mike Shildt said last night, but I think this can be weathered because there's still plenty of baseball to be played.
Yeah. And let's get right into Mike Shildt here because we'll get to Manny. That's in a little bit here. But with Shildt, I wanted to first actually ask because I had some questions for you before what happened last night. And the main Shildt thing that I had was just what have you thought of his in-game management? Because we can obviously talk about his post-game quotes and his optimism, but in-game, let's first start there. What have you thought? Has anything stood out there?
I think he's been good. I think he's been more aggressive than someone like Bob Melvin was, and that's not a knock on Melvin. I think Melvin obviously had the best team that the Padres have had in a good while back in 2022, so he gets credit for managing that team. And there were some moments there that, with the benefit of hindsight, I think a lot of people were critical of, including the National League Championship Series when the team was on a platform playing in its biggest series, maybe in a dozen or 2 dozen years in 2022. But, I haven't been very critical. You watch my show, you listen to Jon and Jim. I'm not overly critical of Mike Shildt in game because I think he's done a good job. I think he's done better than a fine job. I think he's typically been on top of it. I think that by and large, they've held late leads, which is a good quality. Not always, but with Robert Suarez on the mound, they've been able to win games. And, I think he's done fine. I don't think this team would be better with a different manager. I don't know how much worse they'd be with a quote unquote worse manager, but I don't have a ton of faults of the way he's managed the team between the white lines and during, the first 75, 76 games of the year. My criticism is more on the way he interacts with the media and the fans in his post-game press conferences that we've discussed wildly on Jon and Jim. And I know we'll discuss here today, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah, with Shildt, and so to give him like props, it's the in-game stuff that I like Mike Shildt, and I feel like I like him as the manager of this team when he's not talking to the media. Is it fair that maybe the fan base, they want Bob Melvin talking to the media, Padres manager, and they want Mike Shildt, Padres manager in the other areas, right? Like he's together, connected with AJ Preller, but fans want something else that they're not getting in these post-game scrum, these comments from Mike Shildt, which is not everything, by the way, but they're comments and it's good talking points, obviously.
Yeah, it's a fair question. I mean, I don't know if, Bob Melvin post game was something special or unique. I thought he was fair and honest.
Right.
truthfully, to be honest with you, Ben, and you've heard me say this, I mean, the truth is I actually prefer Mike Shildt as someone that covers the team because it gives us something to talk about. I mean, and I've said this a lot, like, I don't think he's playing 4D chess, but if he is, I give him credit because he's deflecting a lot of the attention away from his team and towards himself based on some of the things he says. Like last night, they lose 9-2 in Philadelphia. It's one of their more frustrating, out of the game, essentially all 9 inning performances of the season. Yet he's saying we had a virtual highlight reel defensively in the game. Like things like that aren't typically said by managers. He has said it repeatedly. He's quote unquote gotten away with it. I mean, I don't know how you really hold a manager accountable for some of the things that he says to the media. But again, I think he's deflected attention away from his team and some of their deficiencies, some of their poor play, and put it solely like on himself. I don't know if he's done it with intent or not, but that might actually be a good quality for this team. So we'll see how that plays out. But some of the things he says post-game is perplexing. Does that add up to additional losses or fewer wins? Probably not. But again, for people that are really on top of it, that are following this day in and day out, like your viewers and me and you are doing, it's a little odd the way he communicates with the media, and in turn, he communicates with Padres fans.
Yeah, and what do we want? We just want someone to be honest, and he is being honest with some things, but I think what pisses people off, and I know Jim is definitely one of those, is how he gets into the positives in a 9-2 loss last night, and he's praising the effort of Manny Machado. And by the way, it was also like you said last night, it's actually kind of like a backhand compliment to Manny and kind of calling out Manny in the most Mike Shildt way that he possibly can when he's talking about effort level, and that's appropriate. We're all under question. Just he's referencing Manny there. But this is a guy that has showed up with an ailment that's real, blah, 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 and he's gone out there and played. So he's praising him at the same time. But what we don't want to hear after a bad loss, and you've had 8 straight road losses, is you take accountability. Like, let's be fair, he did do that at times yesterday, and in the past he has. And alibi, he loves using that word. But then he uses the word but after that, and then goes into a bunch of positives and talks for 3 minutes when it was just talking about your concern level. And he answered the question. He said no long term, but then he went into all these positives when you just got blown out by the Phillies, and we just don't want to hear that.
No, I completely agree. I think it is a disservice. I mean, if I'm being entirely truthful, which is what I do and try to do as often as possible when discussing, with Padres fans, and we do it so often that there's no other way to do it, but to be forthright, try to be unbiased with it and truthful, he's doing a disservice to a great fan base. I said last night, maybe you get away with this in Oakland because nobody cares, or Miami or Tampa to some extent, just based on the way the teams are covered, or cities that have NFL teams, and all of a sudden you lose track of your Major League Baseball team in the summer, or a team isn't playing well. But day in and day out, and you know Ben as well as anyone because you're there more often than not, there's 40,000 people there when they're playing the Oakland A's. That's incredibly impressive. They're drawing the same number of fans as the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies are night and day. I mean, these two franchises right now are night and day difference in terms of where Philadelphia is and where San Diego is, yet the Padres are drawing the same way as the Phillies. And I don't know how this would be portrayed in Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, elsewhere, but I know that it wouldn't go over well, and I don't think it's going over well here either. I just think that Padres fans deserve more. They've put up with so much. They've been so supportive beyond the way that most major league teams would be supported in most markets. And I just feel like Mike Shildt owes them more than what he is giving them. And I almost feel like he's trying to pull a fast one on people that you can't do to a knowledgeable, educated fan base. Padres fans aren't stupid. They're aware. They're watching and listening and consuming content day in and day out. Let's just be a little more honest with fans. And I think ultimately maybe it goes a longer way, but it's not going to be who he is, at least not in 2024.
Right. And you're right. We can keep talking about this, but like, I'm not going to be super surprised with really anything that Mike Shildt says the rest of this season, because we know who he is and we know he's going to be pro player. He's not going to do what some fans may want him to do. And that's just what it's going to be. And the good thing is, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter that much. What matters is his in-game management. That's what, and is he going to lose the clubhouse and all that? Like, that's what matters, not what he says post-game. But yeah, last night was interesting. I mean, he says first game that's gotten away from them, which is wrong. Padres will make the postseason. We'll see. defense, like you said, virtual highlight reel. Again, doesn't want Manny's effort to go unnoticed, which him bringing that up, again, like isn't that a little bit concerning too? Because why do you have to bring up, I want to bring up Manny's effort, but why does that have to be brought up? He is the captain of this team. He's getting paid $350 million in this second contract that he's gotten from the Padres. Sure, he's playing hurt, and I love that he has that and he feels like he needs to be in the lineup every day and all that, but that's not something that you should have to go out of your way to, hey, I want to make sure this doesn't go unnoticed in a blowout loss.
Manny Machado and his teammates, and Jim said this last night, and he's spot on, should fall out of bed with great effort. I mean, this is professional sports. Now, again, if you're not 100%, it is reasonable. Manny Machado hasn't been 100%, but how do you explain Friday's quasi jog down to first base and blowing bubbles and then being in the field the next day and then him actually hustling just days later and actually sprinting multiple times? You're telling me he was unable to jog on a Friday and can play in the field on a Saturday and then can sprint on a Monday? Something is off there. And to your point, and Jim talks about this, like, why are we giving out some type of participation trophy or calling out effort for someone that is like has a trajectory of a Hall of Fame career? Like, he should be better than what he is showing Padres fans inherently. Like, we shouldn't be calling him out for hustling on a ball that he ultimately grounded into a double play on. And this guy's got way higher expectations than that. If I'm Manny Machado, and I don't think he really cares, truthfully, but if I was Manny and I'm watching that back and I'm hearing that back, I don't want to be treated like a toddler. You don't need to treat me like that. Now, he's polarizing and he's brash. I'm talking about Manny Machado. And he goes about things uniquely. And to some extent, I enjoy it and I'm comfortable with it. And I like his honesty and his transparency, Manny Machado, even if it rubs people the wrong way. But he doesn't need to be treated like everyone else has kid gloves on around him. Like, Mike Shildt should not be treating him like he's some 19-year-old Rule 5 pick, and we should be congratulating him for effort or some random performance. Manny Machado, the bar and the threshold should be high for all 162 games. Now, there's examples where, again, if you're not healthy and you have to overcome some adversity, that's reasonable. But we're a half season in, Ben. He's hitting under 250. His OPS is under 700. Players on his team and around baseball are running circles around Manny Machado's performance. It's a performance-based business. He's not living up to expectations. He's accountable for it, plain and simple.
Yeah, and the other day, and this was during the Mets series, I think, I put out OPS is ranked on one of the starting lineups from that series, and Manny's 8th.
Like, on the
again,
Padres.
Yeah, on the Padres. Yeah, like that can't be, like Jim said, and you're talking about here, we shouldn't be applauding him for effort when this is happening here. This isn't Kyle Higashioka that we're talking about here. This is Manny Machado. And by the way, for those that missed it, Manny today, or this is last night, to Dennis Lynn, about his sometimes casual playing style, saying it's not my problem what they think. Everyone has an opinion. And that's a Manny response.
That's Manny.
And it's not my problem what they think, like pretty much saying, like, I don't care. I'm fine with that. I don't, and I actually like respect that. And there's certain times where I think we can agree that I don't care what other people think about something that I say or something that happens. Like, you have your opinion, I have mine, and I don't think he should care about what fans think. As long as he is doing what he thinks is best, great. But there's been times where I hope that he looks back and it's like, yeah, probably should have ran that one out a little bit more, or yeah, probably should have done something a little bit different there. And he knows that he's not performing up to the level as well. And so, and maybe the ejection, I know this isn't what we're talking about, but maybe the ejection the other day had a little bit to do with that. And it wasn't just, oh, that pitch was down and out. Like he was telling Kevin Acee that it was just the pitch. I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. But I did want to get to some Manny narratives, some true false Manny Machado narratives, because he's obviously there's been a lot of talk about him and there's been a lot of things said, especially on social media, about Manny Machado. So I just wanted to ask you, do you have one true or false, or true and false, one true and false Manny Machado narrative? For me, like, he doesn't hustle, that narrative. It's kind of true, but it's not totally true because we know that he does hustle in most of the right situations, but sometimes he does not hustle. He doesn't care. He's selfish. Obviously, that for me, that's false. We're not in the clubhouse. If he didn't care, he would be on the IL a bunch in his Padres career, and instead he has fought and not been on the IL. Is that to the detriment of the Padres sometimes? Could be. But just if you have one, I probably should have thrown this at you before, but just one true, one false Manny narrative.
I said a month ago, and I was criticized for saying it, and I'll stick by it. I don't think he hustles. I just don't. And I think he has sold us a narrative that there are different rules for Manny Machado than other players because he produces at such a high level that it should be tolerated. But he doesn't produce at such a high level, and he hasn't since 2022. He's being paid to produce. So you can't live off 2022 2 years later, especially when I look at a player of a similar age and a similar contract in Philadelphia like Bryce Harper that is running circles around Manny Machado each of the last really 3 years, including the 2022 postseason through 2023 and 2024. He hustles when appropriate. That's not a good quality. My son eats vegetables when he wants to, but we want him to eat vegetables each and every day. So he doesn't get to make that decision, or he does. But I mean, we're talking about with a 5-year-old. So he has sold a bill to Padres fans that has been widely accepted to this point, that I know my body, I post, I produce, therefore let me do it my way. Some of it is reasonable. It's now caught up to him. He'll be 32 in 2 weeks, or on July 6th. He's not producing. He needs to show more of the characteristics and qualities of good baseball players than he is showing right now. If he's not healthy, okay, some of it is understandable. But sometimes when you're truly not healthy and you're not helping, you need to be on the IL. So I think that's a fair and reasonable take, that he doesn't hustle to the level that should be expected for a winning player on a winning team. What I do think is a false narrative is that this guy doesn't want to win or isn't the leadership qualities are interesting. I think he's more of a leader by example. But what I'm telling you is some of the examples he's setting for players like Jackson Merrill and others aren't good. So I think when it's good, he can lead you down a good path. I think when it's bad, it can go down a bad path. Do I think ultimately he wants to win? Do I think any of his struggles are tied to his contract? Absolutely not. That's an absurd, ridiculous narrative. I'm sure he's putting in as much work, if not more, than he has previously. I know he's dedicated to winning. I know he'd prefer it as opposed to the opposite. So I think that's a false, ridiculous narrative. But I do think analyzing and critiquing his hustle or lack thereof should be fair and reasonable based on what we see with our own eyes and based on his play.
I agree that he should hustle more. What I would say is, and I don't know if you're saying this, like, I don't think you are, that he should be hustling every time. What I would say is, to those that may think that and have that thought, go look at Fernando Tatis Jr. when he hits a pop-up or a grounder.
Sure.
Is he hustling? Now, he's faster than Manny, so he may be getting to the base faster. But is he hustling? Is Bryce Harper hustling when he hits a grounder? Is he running harder than Manny? Sure. Like, that's fair. But, and Shildt, I think he mentioned this a little bit too, and he's right about this. Pretty much every player, they don't hustle, down the line like Adam Rosales on a home run. They don't hustle all the time when they hit a ball right at someone. It just doesn't happen. And like you said, Manny, his mentality is like, I'm here for 162 games, and if I hustle every time down the line to beat out one of 100 balls that someone botches or something, or it's a bad throw, or you beat a throw, is that worth me, increasing the odds of me getting hurt because I'm sprinting down the line every single time?
Well,
And we're not asking him to do that. I'm just saying,
no,
I think that
it's
he
not
should
about
hustle more.
hustle. To your, it's not solely about. Of course, not all players and all plays are going to 100% max effort with their speed, but there is a baseline level of performance that is required within professional sports, which he did not show Friday against the Mets in walking/jogging down to first and blowing a bubble. That's not acceptable. That has nothing to do with hustle. That's anti-hustle. That's truly a definition of the word lollygagging. That's taking a play off. There's a difference between 100% max effort and truly taking a play off, which, by the way, he's done before this year. And there are a number of examples of it, including on double play balls, including one earlier this year that ended a game that I recall. So again, it's not, of course, not all players perform at 100% max effort on all plays, but you can never show no effort. And when you show no effort, that's egregious. And that's going too far, especially for a player that should be leading this team. And ultimately, as I always say, heavy's the head that wears the crown. He will be accountable for this team's performance or lack thereof, their wins and losses at the end of the season, just like AJ Preller and Mike Shildt. He's not losing his job, but a narrative is being said about Manny Machado, and he's got to win. He's got to win. That's got to be part of his narrative. And right now he's not winning.
Yeah. And what irritates me is when he's running to, and I know we may be blowing this up, but like running to first base and he slows down before he gets to, he pulls up. Like on
Sure.
Friday, he didn't run. I'm not saying you sprint, but he didn't run hard enough. And then he's pulling up before he gets to first base. If you're going to pull up, do it after you hit the bag.
Yep.
So that's just a little thing. But
Sure.
anyway, moving on to the next thing, 1 to 10 level of confidence, 10 being most confident, that we're going to be able to see Musgrove, Darvish get back to being frontline starters this year for this Padres team.
Very low. I mean, no higher than a 2 if you put both of them in there, because I don't have a lot of confidence that Joe Musgrove will be highly effective if he returns. I think there's a decent likelihood he does return, but I don't think you'll be counting on him for meaningful innings potentially in September or October if you get there. Based on everything that we know, 3 IL stints, changing his rotation or release point to some extent based on his breaking pitches. I mean, there's some very concerning trends in there. There are bone spurs, which are real. So if you told me both of them are pitching in meaningful games for the Padres down the stretch, that would surprise me. Do I think Darvish is capable of doing that? Yeah, and I think they're going to need him based on what's transpiring here with Randy Vasquez and Adam Mazur. They will need Darvish. They could use Joe Musgrove, and they need additional starting pitching, in my opinion, based on what's happened over the last 4 or 5 years down the stretch or in the postseasons. But I don't have a high level of confidence that both of them will be pitching impactfully. I think they both absolutely will probably return, but pitching impactfully at the top of your rotation, both of them, that's a little far for me.
Starting pitching or power bat? So are you going with that? Which one? Power bat or starting pitching?
Pitching every day of the week. I mean, they've just run out of it so often, whether it was last year, Musgrove going on the IL after the trade deadline. They played terribly in August. 2022, Clevenger Minaya in the postseason, although they got far in the postseason, but ultimately I thought starting pitching did them in. 2021 was absurd, obviously, the Velasquez's and the Jake Arrieta's. Even 2020, Clevenger going on the IL to Nelson Lamet. It's all starting pitching. You can't add enough. I've said before, I think on John and Jim or the wrap-up show, I'd add a starter and a half, so to speak. So I'll go get a starter and I'll go find a guy that can give me some innings that maybe could make starts for me if necessary. I just don't think you can have too much of it. Michael King has never thrown as many innings as they're going to ask him to throw. You're getting into deep waters. We don't know about Darvish. He's been on the IL multiple times. You don't know about Joe Musgrove. He's been on the IL multiple times. You don't have a ton of depth in your system as shown by Adam Mazur. I'm adding starting pitching every day of the week, and I will succeed or fail based on that as opposed to succeed or fail based on adding a bat. I think they need starting pitching more. That's more reliable than adding an offensive piece.
But is it Garrett Crochet level where you're giving up, I'm not saying the top got 2, but your other top prospects, or is it more of, hey, let's add more on the margins? Because we've seen AJ Preller go both ways, right? Where he goes big or he goes a little bit more on the margins with Scott Barlow in the pen, Rich Hill, G-Man Choi, instead of, we've already been through this, taking a step back last year when we knew it wasn't going to be happening. Just your thoughts on that.
Well, the issue with it's all about risk reward. So if you don't believe strongly in your team, you're going to be doing it on the margins, obviously. But the problem with making trades on the margins is, consider this: you make a trade August 1st. There's 60 games left in the season. This supposed new starter makes 12 starts. The difference between what you had and what you now have is arguably 1 game, right? So you would have gone on making up 5 and 7 in those 12 games. Now you go 6 and 6, or you would have gone 6 and 6 in those 12 games. Now you go 7 and 5. The difference between adding a high ceiling starter just based on 2024, the benefit of Crochet is it goes beyond 2024, although we don't know about his innings in 2024. I think the benefit of someone like Crochet or Frontline is that you're now putting yourself in a position where you could win an additional game or 2. It's not more than that, by the way. It's not drastic. It can help you in the postseason should you get there. But I'm not saying, hey, Crochet is worth no one that you're acquiring is worth 5 wins. Nobody's worth 4 wins. Nobody's worth, we're talking 2, maybe someone could buy you 2 wins where when you're on the margins, it's a half win, maybe one way or the other. Or I think if you go out and get someone front line, maybe it buys you another couple of wins. Now you're thinking beyond 2024 as well, I think, if you're the organization and AJ Preller. But I said this last night as well. And I think that good organizations don't determine a direction that they're going to go at the deadline until they know the hand they're dealt. Now we all think AJ Preller, the riverboat gambler, buy. There's no path towards selling. But if you get to a spot like they were in 2023, and you have already previously determined we're not going to sell Blake Snell, we're not going to sell Josh Hader, I don't think that's a good thing necessarily for the organization. If we get to the trade deadline and they're in it, go buy. If you're really in it, go buy with high ceilings. And if you don't think you're going to be in it, don't be scared to sell. And that's what a good organization's got to do. You're thinking about now and you're thinking about the future, but I don't think it should be predetermined on June 18th with this much time between now and the trade deadline.
And last one here, do we spend too much time like talking about how, oh man, they're still 500, they're around 500, this is so frustrating? Shouldn't we like accept that this is just who they are until proven otherwise?
Probably. Yeah, I think that's fair.
But like for us, right, we talk about the team every day, so it's understandable. But I feel like sometimes people, other fans that maybe don't do what we do, they're like talking about, oh, they're still 500. Well, yeah, that's who this team is.
I don't have a problem with it. Jim takes more exception than I do with, should a 500 team be celebrated? I said, well, the Padres didn't determine the rules. I mean, if they make the postseason, there'll be a level of excitement, and you never know what could happen. We've seen it with the Phillies in 2022, the Diamondbacks in 2023. There's countless examples in the wild card era of 80-something win teams having success in the postseason. They didn't determine the rules. So if they make it, they make it. I mean, the NBA has 20 postseason teams essentially with the play-in tournament. Not that all those seasons are successful, and coaches come and go in the NBA, just like managers can come and go in Major League Baseball. But listen, it's a 500 team in a new world of baseball where it becomes relevant and topical because a lot of these teams or some of these teams are going to be in the postseason. So that's how they should be covered, like a team with flaws that has a very realistic path to the postseason, that if they miss out on the postseason, they have a lot of explaining to do. And I've said this a lot. The seventh best team in the National League is the biggest loser in baseball and arguably in sports because it doesn't take a ton this year to get to the postseason. It might not take more than 82 or 83 wins. If you're trying to get there and you're the first team out, you've got a lot of explaining to do to your organization and your fans.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, Jon Schaeffer from Jon and Jim, San Diego Sports 760 Padres wrap-up show. Thank you so much for coming on, man. Really appreciate it. And by the way, this is the new radio voice of San Diego State Aztecs football. I don't think I've had you on since then. So congratulations on that. This was obviously a Padres filled show. We'll talk more about San Diego State, later down the line once we get into that season. But yeah, Jon, thank you so much. Everyone, make sure to check them out if you have not already. Jon and Jim, again, San Diego Sports 760. They'll be on the radio today at 3 to 6 weekdays. And that's it. Thank you, everyone, for the time. Have a good one.